Yes, yes, yes! Welcome to Off My Bridge. My name is Guy, and today we finish fixing Star Trek Generations. If you have not watched the previous 3 episodes where I talk about what I would have done differently with Star Trek Generations, I strongly suggest you go and check those out first before watching this week's episode. Now, if you remember, Kirk and Picard left the Nexus, but because they can travel anywhere in time to any location, they travel back to the Amargosa Star. But they travel back to the Amargosa Star before the Enterprise D arrives to investigate and before the Romulan attack on the Amargosa Star. So they can prevent all of this from happening. Their plan is to overpower good old Soren and to take him captive and to prevent the whole thing from happening. However, Lurso and Beato have done exactly the same thing, only they've returned to an earlier time, about a week or so, and you'll see why in a little bit. Anyway, Picard and Kirk arrive on the Amargosa station, where immediately they disable Soren, who feigns ignorance, but then they reveal his secret stash of trilithium and, of course, their weapon. The Romulans arrive, as predicted. Only this time, the station has the Romulan trilithium, but before the negotiations can be successfully and calmly negotiated for the trilithium to be handed back to the Romulans, the Klingons arrive. This time, it's double Lursor and double Beator. They've teamed up with themselves from the past and have arrived with 5 Duros-controlled Klingon ships. The 5 ships disable the Romulan ship without much difficulty, beam Soren and his weapons off of the station, and for good measure, fire the test missile at the Viridian Sun, even though Lursor and Beator know that the outcome is going to destroy the station. They leave. Picard, Kirk, and the station personnel are now stranded and have no real hope of survival. Except, of course, that the Enterprise D arrives. This is because one of the Amargosa Star scientists still sent out a mayday when the 5 Klingon ships arrived. Picard and Kirk realize that they cannot meet Picard from the past. That would convolute the timeline, and that's desperately something that they want to avoid. Now that things are in motion with the destruction of the Amargosa Star, their only option is to get to Viridian 3. This means, of course, that they need to get the Enterprise to Viridian 3. What do? Picard and Kirk beam aboard the Romulan ship, where we discover a heavily wounded Tomalak, the Romulan commander that Picard has encountered many times in the Next Generation. Tomalak spits daggers at Picard. "How dare you lure us into this trap, Picard? I find your attack will bring about war between the Romulan people and my Federation. I will not stand for them." Picard's like, "Yeah, shut up. We're going to work together." The station crew of the Amargosa Star, along with Picard and Kirk, join together on the Romulan ship. They contact the Enterprise D, and Tomalak puts on a brave face of saying that they're both going to follow to Viridian 3. The Enterprise D and the Romulan warship, which is being repaired en route, arrive in orbit of Viridian 3 and immediately come under attack by the 5 Klingon ships. The actual Picard, who's on the Romulan ship, beams down to the planet's surface with Tomalak and with several of Tomalak's remaining Romulan officers. Kirk remains on board the Romulan ship, which is a nice little throwback to Balance of Terror and things like that in his TV series. He remains on the ship with several of the Amargosian scientists, and they are going to help the Enterprise D fight off this giant Klingon fleet. Picard arrives on Viridian 3 to try and stop Soren. Picard on the Enterprise D, so this is past Picard who's now present Picard, but not the main Picard, he is killed in the initial skirmish with the Klingons. Worf and Riker and Kirk, even though they think it's still Tomalak, are fighting the Klingons, and it's a great big dramatic battle. But it allows Kirk to show us his command chops. As he realizes what Riker is doing is being much more defensive, Kirk comes to the fore and says, "I don't believe in a no-win scenario, this is how we win this scenario." So he and Riker are butting heads, which I think could be quite fun, especially since Kirk and Picard were working together. It gives us some nice tension. Of course, the space battles are dramatic and cool, and we have no budget limitations, so we can make them really awesome. It also gives us the opportunity to give Worf the chance to shine as a tactical officer, disabling one of the Klingon ships. He and Data and Geordi and all those kinds of things can come together to really show us what the Enterprise D crew is all about, rather than them just being defeated like little first-year cadets. Meanwhile, on the planet's surface, Soren and the Romulans and Tomalak and Picard now engage in a battle of wits. Soren has booby-trapped the entire area in anticipation of being followed. He also has Klingon troops that will take out the Romulan troops, eventually leaving Tomalak, Picard, and Soren effectively alone in the ruins of this old fortress. Now remember, we wanted the planet Viridian to have a population on it, so it's a pre-warp civilization, and as it so happens, the only weapons that eventually end up being of usable nature are no longer the phasers, which are disabled, destroyed, or otherwise lost, but, of course, swords. Picard and Tomalak versus Soren beat him all the way back to his missile stand that's about to be launched. But at the last moment, Tomalak, of course, turns on Picard, going, "I'm sorry, but this weapon is way too valuable to be left in the hands of the Federation. The Romulan Star Empire is going to claim it." And so he hands Picard over to Soren, or at least that's what appears to happen. Picard, however, says, "I've had enough of this," and he just decks Tomalak, and then puts his comm badge on Tomalak and orders Kirk to beam him up. Soren and Picard now engage in a wonderful duel, a sword duel. This is not punch-up fisticuffs, this is Picard. If it was Sisko or Kirk, yes, punch-up, go ahead for it. But Picard's a fencer. Soren, of course, we have learned through various bits of dialogue, "I too have used the sword, Picard." And off we go. They have a beautiful choreographed sword fight. It's wonderful, it's marvelous, it's spectacular. Meanwhile, in space, Kirk and Riker have now come together and are starting to kick Klingon ass. Lursor and Bieto refuse to accept defeat again, and so they start to be much more aggressive in their attack, focusing purely on the Enterprise D. The Enterprise D, of course, taking huge amounts of damage, and, well, in the process, Kirk realizes that the Enterprise is not going to survive. He contacts Riker, who's very shocked, going, "Wait a minute, what's happening here?" and says, "Look after her, she's a good ship." He closes the channels and flies the Romulan warship directly into Lursor's ship, the last remaining Klingon ship. Of course, Tomalak materializes just as Kirk's ship is about to impact with the Romulans, looks up and says, "Kirk, my mother warned me of you." We might as well do a throwback to the Romulan commander that Kirk seduced. Why not? It could be fun, could be interesting, and there you go. So that's the end of Tomalak, wrapping up that little neat storyline, if you will. The destruction of Kirk and the Klingons is spectacularly tragic. Of course, Worf at this point realizes that the two Lursors had connived together to create a bigger explosion in the event of their death, and so the destruction of the ships causes damage to the Enterprise D, causing the Enterprise to lose orbit and to go and crash on the planet, because let's be honest, that was a really cool sequence and deserves to be repeated again. It also means that we get the Enterprise E in the next film, and so we need to get rid of the Enterprise D. Soren and Picard are desperately fighting. Picard knocks Soren away in some daring swordplay, gets to the missile launcher. Soren, using a weapon that's appropriate to the time period that the ruins are based in, sneaks up behind Picard and skewers him, not through his mechanical heart, but through the back, or through the chest, or somewhere that he thinks will be debilitating. Picard rolls away, defiantly looking miserable. And of course, as he does this, Soren looks down, realizes the missile's about to launch, but Picard has jammed his rapier into the flight control systems of the rocket, and of course Soren is destroyed. We then cut to a scene at the very end of the film where Picard, Riker, The ruined Enterprise are standing over the grave of Kirk, who has finally given his very all to save the universe yet again. Here is where I think it's appropriate for Picard to finish the film, where Riker says, "I wish we could undo this," and Picard should turn to him and say, "Time gives our actions meaning. Because if we can simply redo our actions until they are correct, no action has any kind of value. So going back in time and changing our actions, changing the past, would make every action irrelevant. And irrelevancy means there is no meaning. And so if our actions, if we are to derive meaning from them, we need to bear the burden of time. And that burden is being unable to change our actions and knowing that those actions define us. Because without them, we have no definition, we have no meaning, and therefore there's no point to it all, number one. We must learn from this, move forward, and see what our future actions will bring. Not lament our past actions. Or something much more eloquent than that, but something like that. And that's how the film ends, where we have a sense of future. Yes, things have been miserable, things are sad, but Picard has come to terms with them. He's moved forward. He realizes the importance of this stuff. And so we can now finish the film. That's how I would have done it. I like to, if they're going to tie up Next Gen and Star Trek, the original series, let's tie up Next Gen, let's tie up the original series so that the next film moving forward is free of all of that stuff. And we have the Borg in the episode 8, which was just fantastic and so on. What would you do? I'd love to know what you would do as a conclusion. I really enjoyed your thoughts on the third part of the show that we did, Fixing Generations. So I'd love to see what you'd come up with on how you'd conclude the rewriting of Generations. Anyway, if you want to do another film like this, let me know in the comments down below. And what film would it be? The next one that I would redo is number 5. That's if you found this series interesting. Again, let me know in the comments down below. Until next week, where we will be looking at time travel, which kind of has happened in this series already, but we're going to be looking at all of the different aspects of time travel, and there are so many of them. It's insane. I love it. I wish you and yours the happiest of gaming.